This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, and the most exciting time of the year for Major League Baseball has arrived. The postseason is here, and today I will be breaking down the American League Wild Card game. The Baltimore Orioles traveling to the Rogers Center in Toronto to take on the Blue Jays in what should be a very intriguing matchup. Winner taking on the Texas Rangers in the American League Division Series. That will begin later this week. Let's get to it. Let's look at this Baltimore-Toronto wild card matchup in the American League taking place on Tuesday night, October the 4th, 8:08 p.m. Eastern Time. First pitch at the Rogers Center. The starting pitchers on both sides have been announced. We are looking at Chris Tillman on the mound for the Baltimore Orioles. Marcus Stroman has been selected to be the starter for this game by John Gibbons for the Toronto Blue Jays. And a very fascinating starting pitching matchup because for years and years, Chris Tillman was treated like a human piñata by the Toronto Blue Jays lineup. They just crushed him time in and time out. This year it's been a bit of a different story. We have seen a little bit of a different Chris Tillman pitching here against this Toronto Blue Jays lineup. A Blue Jays lineup that I think we can safely say simply isn't quite that same scary, explosive, potent lineup that we saw from them last year. Maybe a case of regression, maybe a case of pitchers just doing a different job of deciding how to attack these hitters, maybe pitching them more inside. We've seen that a lot. The likes of Josh Donaldson, Bautista, Encarnacion, all of these big-time sluggers for the Blue Jays sort of being backed off the plate a little bit by hitters, trying to get them off the plate with that inside pitch. And as a result, maybe it's taken away some of the aggressiveness of these Blue Jays hitters. Nevertheless, you have to like what Chris Tillman has, the way he's pitched for this team. You could argue maybe Buck Showalter should have gone with Ubaldo Jimenez, who's really pitched well the last month or so here down the stretch of the regular season. But I think Chris Tillman from start to finish has been the best pitcher this season for the Baltimore Orioles. A big-time bounce-back campaign for him. You look at his road record, 2.97 ERA for Tillman in 14 road starts for the Orioles this year. Baltimore has gone 10-4 in Chris Tillman's 14 road starts during the regular season. His recent outings have been good. He's allowed 3 runs or less in 4 straight starts to close out the regular season against Detroit, Tampa Bay, Boston, Toronto. So some pretty good teams, pretty good lineups that Chris Tillman's faced down the stretch and has pitched well against those teams. And against the Blue Jays, look at his numbers this year. I mean, it was such a struggle for him prior to this season, but he's faced the Jays 4 times, twice at Camden Yards, twice here at the Rogers Center. 3 of those 4 outings, including both outings here in Toronto, he's allowed 2 runs or less. In fact, Orioles 2-0 in Chris Tillman's 2 starts against the Jays here at the Rogers Center. Now, the one concern you have with Tillman, you got to like his current form. You have to like the way he's pitched against Toronto this season, but the playoff experience factor, that's not necessarily something that's on his side. Chris Tillman does not have a much big game experience pitching in this kind of pressure spot here in the postseason. He's only made 1 playoff start in his career, and it was with Baltimore just a couple of years ago in 2014. And to say that was an ugly start would be an understatement. It was in the ALCS against the Kansas City Royals, and it did not go well. 5 runs on 7 hits, 4.1 innings for Tillman against that Royals team that year. That's his 1 playoff start in the past. So, he's a guy that hasn't really faced a ton of situations like this. Playoffs, 1 game and you're out if you lose, 1 game and you move on if you win. So it's going to be a different kind of pressure for Chris Tillman. He's had a great season. He's been he's been the most consistent arm that Buck Showalter has been able to trust in an otherwise very rocky Orioles starting rotation. But playoff experience and that 1 bad playoff start that he's had in the past, still something that maybe resonates in the back of Tillman's mind here. On the flip side, you've got Marcus Stroman, who unlike Tillman, does have a little bit more recent playoff starting experience. Made 3 playoff postseason starts last year for the Toronto Blue Jays. Pitched fairly well in all of them. 4 runs allowed in 7 innings against Texas. In the second start against Texas in last year's division series, 2 runs on 6 hits in 6 innings. Against Kansas City, he got hit around a little bit. 11 hits allowed, but minimized the damage. 4 runs allowed in 6.1 innings when he faced the Royals in the ALCS last year, did Marcus Stroman. So he's pitched well in the playoffs last year for this Blue Jays team. That being said, you worry that maybe this is not quite the same Marcus Stroman this year. He's had an issue this year keeping the ball up in the strike zone, elevating his pitches far too much, and as a result, he's been hit around a little bit more than we've been accustomed to seeing from Marcus Stroman, who's had a very much up and down season for the Jays. We're talking about a 4.37 ERA at home. His numbers, 4.59 ERA on the campaign, and against this Baltimore Orioles team, boy, they've had some very good swings, very good plate approaches, and very good success against Marcus Stroman so far this season. 3 starts against the Baltimore Orioles. The last 3 starts Stroman's made against them, they've not been pretty whatsoever for Marcus Stroman in those outings. He's allowed 15 runs on 27 hits in his last 16 innings of work facing the Baltimore Orioles. Not very pretty statistics by any stretch of the imagination. Now, John Gibbons says that despite the struggling track record that Stroman's had against the Orioles, and he's 0-3 in his last 3 starts against the Orioles, he's going to be on a quick leash, a short leash. John Gibbons has said he's going to have Francisco Liriano as well as Marco Estrada ready to go out of the bullpen for this game if they're required, if Marcus Stroman gets into early struggles. So that's something that you're going to want to watch for. Stroman might get into some early troubles. But the one thing that's interesting to me as we talk about most of the season, Baltimore and Toronto, these potent lineups, these home run hitters up and down their lineups, well, the offenses on both sides have not exactly been crushing the baseball down the stretch of the season, and especially in head-to-head meetings between these two teams. When you look at it, Baltimore and Toronto now 7-0 to the under in the last 7 head-to-head meetings between these two teams. I mean, they played a 4-game series or a 3-game series in August at Camden Yards. All 3 games easily cruised under the total. They just played at the Rogers Center last week. All 3 games easily cruising under the total. 6, 5, and 4 total runs scored in those 3 games. Total of this game sitting at 8.5. With the way the lineups are going for both teams, and we've seen it specifically from the Jays, they're just not coming through with big hits with runners in scoring position. That's a big issue. They're getting guys on base, but they're just lacking that one big blow with the runners on base, and it's really been hurting this offense, and that's why they've been in a lot of close games, a lot of lower scoring games. At 8.5, I can only look at this game going under the total. I know Tillman, making this playoff start, something he's not quite used to, but he has pitched well this season, pitched well recently against the Jays. Stroman does have a track record that is worrisome against the Baltimore Orioles, but again, neither lineup really crushing the ball of late, despite all their home run hitters that they get lauded for having on these 2 lineups. I would look for a lower scoring game, lean to the under 8.5 in that game. Not a strong opinion. It'll be a small play for me, but still would lean under the total. I think the better play in this game is from a side perspective. I'm going to look toward the run line. You've got to lay a little bit more juice to do this. We're looking at minus 155, minus 160 to take Baltimore plus 1.5 runs on the run line. Minus 155, minus 160 is the price of that. Let's put it bluntly. Toronto's not hitting the ball right now. Marcus Stroman with a suspect track record against Baltimore, although he did pitch well in the playoffs last year. We'll have to see if he can bring that same good performance to the table here against a lineup that has had a good amount of success against him this season. The concern for me is the Toronto bullpen. I mean, if this game is close in the latter stages and their lineup hasn't shown me they can pull away, I mean, you look at what the Blue Jays have done in recent games. When's the last time they've beaten a team by margin? It's been a while. I mean, they are in close, tooth and nail, hard-fought, close games, it seems, time and time again lately, this Toronto Blue Jays team. I mean, look at the last week or so of the season. The last game of their series against the Yankees, or the last win they got in that series, they win 4-3. Then they beat Baltimore 5-1, but you look at their last 5 games of the season, they go 2-3, and the 2 victories over the weekend at Fenway Park were 4-3 and 2-1 victories, and they just barely eked them out. Only 1-run victories. Only a 1-run victory here for Toronto cashes a Baltimore run line ticket. I think that's the safest way to bet the side in this game. I really am not in love with this game from a betting perspective. These are going to be small plays for me, but I'm going to lean to the under 8.5 in this game, and I will also lean to Baltimore plus 1.5 runs at minus 155, minus 160 in this AL wildcard matchup. Let's keep in mind, again, if this game is close, Baltimore's bullpen has proven to be better than Toronto's, especially down the stretch. A lot of good arms out there. Michael Givens, Brad Brock. We know how good Zach Britton has been as the closer. Whereas Toronto, their bullpen suffered since Joaquin Benoit had that fluke injury, calf injury that he suffered in that melee with the Yankees back at the Rogers Center last month. That's a concern. Their bullpen's not as deep. They're going to be putting a lot of onus on Joe Biagini, who's still, in his first year as a major league reliever for this game. And a lot of guys are going to have to step up into different roles. Jason Grilly's been a little bit worrisome, a little bit shaky of late. Roberto Osuna, the same thing. He's logged a lot of innings lately. He's not exactly been able to get smooth 1, 2, 3 innings in the ninth. There could be some shaky moments for this Toronto bullpen. We've seen it on display the last week or so, and for that reason, I think Toronto's going to be in tough to win this game at all, let alone win it by any sort of margin. So I'll lean to Baltimore. Let's go with that. Baltimore plus 1.5 runs on the run line, about minus 160 you can get with that, if you don't mind laying a little bit more juice on that one, as well as under the total, 8.5 runs. We've got two lineups that aren't exactly clicking at their best right now, and two maybe underrated pitchers. I know Tillman's been good against the Jays this season, and Stroman, despite struggles against the Orioles this season, that kid's got a lot of moxie, and he's just not afraid of the spotlight. And sometimes you see guys like Stroman that can elevate their game in a big spot and a big game. He did it last year. We'll see if he can do it again on Tuesday night in this AL wildcard matchup. So we'll lean to Baltimore plus 1.5 runs and the under 8.5 in Tuesday night's AL wildcard matchup. All right, that's my look at the AL wildcard game, Baltimore and Toronto. I will be back on Tuesday. We'll look at the NL wildcard game on Wednesday night. What a matchup it should be. Giants taking on the Mets. Bumgarner versus Syndergaard. Doesn't get much better than that. I'll give you my betting preview of that game on Tuesday. So until then, I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review. Enjoy the MLB postseason, and good luck.
Do your research before you bet. Check out our ratings guide to see which books have the best ratings and sign-up bonuses. Open up several accounts and shop for lines at sbrodds.com. Always be ahead of the game.